I'm David Jonathan Ross, here to talk to you about my first variable font. I love letters that fill space. Here are some letters filling my home state of Massachusetts. And I mean, if you really think about it, we as graphic designers are space fillers in a way. Especially in display typography, we are constantly making words fill pages and screens. And of course, we all have this instinct. This is Helvetica, smushed until it fills the screen, which of course your typography professor probably told you never to do. But I get the desire, I get the instinct to want to make your type squeeze to fit the space that you have. A type is like a liquid, it fills the container it's in. But yeah, the whole problem with this, of course, is that when you squish type, when you horizontally or vertically distort type, you change the relationship of thicks and thins. Here, for example, is a low contrast sans serif, where the vertical and the horizontal are roughly the same. But yeah, once you squish it, all of a sudden that vertical stroke gets a lot lighter, and you get this horizontal stress effect, which isn't intentional. It isn't part of this typeface. So I, as a type designer, would of course come in and correct for that. I would add back weight to those verticals so that a condensed has the same stroke contrast as the normal width. But again, I understand the instinct. I understand that you want to just have fonts that just like turn everything up to 11 and really blow out all the wattage in your graphic designs. And that's why I made the font Fit. It looks a bit more epic when you add some clouds or something in the background. And Fit, it was my first variable font. It was released within 6 months, maybe less, of the publishing of the variable font spec. And yeah, with Fit, and with all variable fonts, rather than having separate discrete styles that build up these families, you can take all those different weights and widths and variations and kind of smush them into a single font. And it's a really powerful thing because you don't only get those styles, but you also get everything in between them, essentially for free. So yeah, Fit is designed to fit just about any text into just about any space. The idea is using variable fonts to solve the problem that squishing doesn't do a great job of. And that is, having a font that fills space without having to distort itself to do so. And I actually learned a lot about this technique from my previous typeface Input. Input is a system of fonts for code, including monospace versions. And in a monospace font, letters of all widths and complexities have to kind of fit in the same width, which can make it really tricky when you have a really kind of simple letter like R that only has 1.5 strokes, and a more complex, dense letter like M, which has 3 strokes. All of a sudden there's this tension between them because the M all of a sudden has to squish to fill the same space, and the R has to kind of spread out to fill that space. And as a type designer, I'm doing all sorts of optical compensations to try to smooth out that tension, to try to make these two letters feel like they're part of the same typeface, even if they're radically different and doing very different things. So for example, you can see in these two letters that the stem weight of the R is actually a little bit heavier than the stem weight of the M. I'm essentially reducing the weight of the M to compensate for the extra density in that letter because of how much more complex it is. And as the font gets bolder, that difference is exacerbated. You can see that now the R is a significant amount lighter than the M. And again, this difference is in order to make these two letter forms feel like they're the same weight. In Fit, it kind of takes that whole idea to its logical extreme. If my screen is now the canvas I need to fill, and I just fill it with a rectangle, that's my capital I. And you can see that its stem weight is that thick. But then, if I have a two-stroke letter like R, all of a sudden the stem weight goes down, and it's that thick. And in a three-stroke letter, now the stem weight's about a third of the screen. And the difference between the difference between fit and a monospace typeface is that fit is not really monospacing letters, it's monospacing words. So the same logic applies to entire words. As you add more strokes to the text, the stems get correspondingly thinner in order to compensate for that additional density. And you can see that fit goes all the way from that super wide, that really wide I, and gets narrower and narrower and narrower until it's almost illegible. And the stroke weights are actually the same as the counterforms between them. And yeah, the counterforms are actually the anchor that's holding the entire typeface together, because regardless of the width and the density, the counterforms are always staying the same. Of course, this doesn't only apply to the letters. The part of the fun of this typeface was kind of executing it across the typographic system, from numbers, where you can see the wastes of the letters getting pushed either really far down or really high up to kind of fill the space. And also in punctuation, where I got and symbols, where I got increasingly desperate. You can see my solution for the percent sign was a little bit of a hack, but hey, it works. And yeah, even with accented characters, I was like, well, if the point of this typeface is to fill space, then why don't I have these letters duck down in order so that their accents can occupy only the space allotted? And that was especially fun for Vietnamese, where you have tone marks that lay on top of accents, and so letters had to duck down extra to give clearance for multiple diacritics. And of course, this whole font works because it's a variable font. This font really wouldn't be the same without this technology, because all of these different capital A's that exist in fit were able to fit in this single font file. And that means that together with my colleague Chris Lewis, I was able to build this website where you can actually drag and squeeze and stretch these letter forms, but while doing so, never distorting them. If you watch those white spaces as I stretch and squeeze them, they're not getting distorted at all. The horizontals and the verticals remain intact. And so for me, this is super fun and just a super interesting way to fill space without having to worry about destroying the designer's intent. In order to do this with static fonts, we actually generated 1,000 static font files, because that was the only way to kind of get fit to give us all the variations we needed to fit any words in the allotted space. So for me, that just shows the power of variable fonts, that it took 1,000 fonts to even start to mimic what we were trying to do. It's been, it was really fun to then take this typeface and bring it to different writing systems. It's kind of a devastatingly simple, some might even say stupid concept for a font, but that means it translates fairly straightforwardly. It's not there's not too much about it that's Latin specific. So the first thing I did was to draw Cyrillic, because I thought it connected nicely to kind of constructivism and I consulted with Masha Doriuli from Contrast Foundry, who gave me some great pointers, and I think it turned out great. And then I was like, well, I guess I should also do a Greek. After that, I started hearing from other designers, and rather than drawing this stuff myself, letting them take the typeface and see where it went. The first collaboration I did was Fit Hebrew, which was drawn by Oded Ezer. The second was Fit Armenian, drawn by Gorge Ahanian. And the third, and the one that was actually released earlier this week, was Fit Devanagari, drawn by Kimia Gandhi. Yeah, it's really mind-blowing. And what's next for this typeface? I'm working again with Gore Jahanian to try to make an even more complex and more useful variable font for animation and more complex typographic systems. Part of that is unitizing the font, so making it very easy to tell how many letters fit into how many other letters. So, for example, this bottom line here, the A is actually a square, and then you can easily find other styles in the font which are 2 squares wide or 3 squares wide, or where 2 letters fit in a square or 3 letters fit in a square, and that should make it easier to do kind of more wood type style experimentation and combining different widths together to create more interesting layouts. And then finally, Gore has been adding a bunch of axes, including finally a proper weight axis, so fit can get wide, or get light without getting narrow, and that adds a ton of flexibility for animation. Also a height axis, so letters can literally grow from the baseline, as well as different kinds of shifts, so you can control whether the letters grow from the center, whether they grow from the left or the right, and what have you. So I'm really hoping that this will make Fit an even more powerful variable font for animation in the future. Yeah, so that's this typeface. I am excited to see what you do with it.